Thank you, Devanshi. I'm so lucky to have a great panel today to discuss absolute the need of the hour topic, which is innovations in Indian pharma. There is a very popular and very easy management principle that either be the best or be the first or be the different. I'm very happy that we have Nishith Desai here, who went slightly beyond that and gave entire NDA firm a word called distinctly different. And that is what I think we are going to talk about. And in present times, new times, I'm not COVID, but recent times when we are there with technology and everything, the conventional sayings like practice makes men perfect and opportunity knocks your door once have totally changed. It is not the practice that makes men perfect, but it is a perfect practice that makes men perfect. And it says that opportunity will never knock your door anytime because you have to create the opportunity, because if you create that opportunity will lead to success, and once you achieve that success you are going to be different, not necessarily different but distinctly different, and achieve what exactly you need to do. And doing this distinctly different, the word which is there, which is very relevant, very important, is to innovate. Innovation is going to become very important in recent times, especially when we talk about pharma. Because today, I think Indian pharma is at the age of a very big leap. And it is said that crisis brings opportunities, and opportunities will lead to success, and what it is. And that is what possibly I feel sorry to say, but is it a blessings in disguise type of situation? Maybe no. But the crisis which requires some kind of therapy remedy for the patients suffering from COVID-19 requires something. And that is where so many research is happening across the world. And everybody is going to look at India. And that is why I said that India is absolutely at the a big leap situation, whether it is manufacturing, whether it is supply, whether it is sale or import, or for that matter, R&D. And that is why I think I personally feel, and I think I'm sure my co-panelists also would agree that India is more dominant in the D of R&D and slightly low in R of R&D. I think this is where I think the focus needs to be to grab that opportunity and make that big leap. That there has to be some kind of rethinking, paradigm shift towards innovation side from Indian pharma, across all service areas. And that is what I think we are going to discuss today, that how exactly that R of R&D can really come to India. And I'm so happy that we have KG. We fondly call him KG. So I take liberty today to call Nishith Desai NMD, as entire firm calls him very fondly. And I'll call Gowree Gokhale GG. So I have KG, NMD, and GG on the panel. So I just start with you, KG. That as I mentioned, the crisis brings opportunity always, and I think this pandemic, COVID-19, has come out with some kind of a crisis which requires development of new therapies, and so many work is happening across the world, especially in pharma. Do you believe that this crisis has brought opportunity to India? And if yes, would being innovative or innovation across the sector of pharma in India would play major role to bring that R of R&D to India and grab that big leap to scale greater heights? Yeah, KG.
Thanks, Milind. You have put it very nicely, that we must try and change this crisis into an opportunity. And that is true because we should never allow a crisis to be wasted. And I think this is the right time, particularly for the pharma industry, to reflect upon, what is it that we need to do going forward. I'm talking more from the Indian pharma context. As you rightly said, Milind, on a global basis, if you look at it, more than several pharma companies, over 20 of them, several biotechnology companies all over the world are grappling with several technologies, whether it is repurposing the old molecules or whether looking at vaccines or looking at some other, monoclonal antibodies and what have you, to try and find a solution to this challenge that we are facing, what we call it as, COVID-19. So there is an extraordinary amount of work that is going on. And I firmly believe that we will get some solution out of it. Already some rays of hope is emanating, from the emergency use approval that has come for remdesivir and few other products. And that is what innovation brings. Because when you innovate, and innovation, when you talked about the R&D, let us look at it from an Indian context. We must also feel proud that we developed ourselves very strongly in D. That is excellent. Okay, so that has also given us a very good foundation. And now is the time that we should try and shift our focus to the R part of the R&D, which is actually the basic innovation that we are talking about. The reason why I feel a little bit confident that India will move in that particular path is for the following reason. The first and foremost is, and I'm sure many of you, at least in India, would have noted a few days back, Prime Minister took a detailed review of the current status of India's development in vaccines. This is the first time, at least, I have heard about a Prime Minister sitting and reviewing a scientific development that is happening in this country, and he was talking about the following approaches, whether it is repurposing of the existing drugs, developing of new candidates. He also talked about, plant extracts, etc. The review also took a note of something very interesting, note of extraordinary coming together of academia, industry, and government. And PM made a very interesting note further. He said that such a collaboration, which has happened today because of a crisis situation, first, it must be embedded into a system, because what need not have to wait for a crisis for coming together of these three components, the scientific research, the academia, and the policy makers, to create a good platform. This, in my opinion, is a very good development, because when the state head, the country head, is looking at research, that's a very positive signal. And that's the reason why I feel, from a policy point of view, hopefully there will be some very, very interesting developments that will happen, because he said also that the entire regulatory landscape has to be, completely revamped, which is very important, because for R to happen, we must have a good another R, and that is the regulatory framework.
Regulation.
Right. And that is what he addressed. So that was a very interesting stuff. Let me go to the other point. If you look at the 2019 Global Innovation Index that came in, the interesting theme of 2019 was of creating healthy lives, the future of medical innovation.
That's true.
That was the theme of 2019. It couldn't have been in a much better timing than now. Not that we wanted to have a crisis, but the fact is, at least we have started thinking about, how do we try and safeguard the lives of people, have a better quality of life by focusing on innovation in the pharmaceutical industry. When I'm talking about pharmaceutical, it is pharmaceutical, but let us also accept the reality. I think the digital space is going to play a very dominant role as we go forward in the life sciences sector, along with the pharmaceutical, whether it is AI, whether it is, other technologies that will come, and it will play a very, very important role. So it is important now that, this technology collaboration between biotech firms, academia, and governments, when it come together, it is going to give, I think, a very good flavor for the Indian industry also to really start looking at, the R part of it. I'll just go one more step back. This year, or end of last year, there was a very interesting report released by IPA and McKinsey. And I'm sure you're all privy to it. And that, again, was a very nice signal, because what it said is that it outlines the need for India to emerge as R&D leader. And the hope is that by 2030, we will have at least 5 to 6 molecules which would have been totally synthesized in India. The fact that Indian pharma industry is beginning to think in that direction is also a very encouraging trend, that I think it's the right time. And now this crisis, unfortunate though, probably will further step up the efforts of the Indian pharma industry to really, focus on the R part of R&D. And then, Milind, if we are going to create a very good ecosystem, this collaborative academia industry partnership, a good regulatory framework, then I believe that India will also be able to attract, investments from abroad of the global pharma companies. Today, approximately, about $100 billion is spent by the global pharma companies in research and development. That's a huge amount that is being spent, and India attracts, I think, only around 2 to 3% of that particular investment. And why does it attract such a low investment? Because of a little bit of a doubt on the regulatory landscape, the policy environment. So we must make the best use of this, this event, if I have to call it as an unfortunate event, and see how can we turn it upside down and make it into an opportunity to attract this, R&D investment from the global pharma companies as well into India, so that it becomes a true, R&D hub. And probably subsequently, I will also share with you some other thoughts. That is there a way that we can even create a Boston model in our country? Because I believe there is a capability that is existing here. There is a sort of a momentum that is getting picked up, and we have extraordinary science that is there in India. Probably we'll have to move in this direction, and that's the reason why I'm very optimistic about our coming back in India in a much bigger way. Over to you, Milind.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I am so energized and boosted that hey, we are there, and we talked so much about hope yesterday. I and Gowree were talking about IP and patented drugs being made accessible to Indian population, and we all talked about hope. And what came out yesterday, that hope needs to become reality. That is what, and I'm so happy with somebody like you at your stature talks about so much of hope which is going to happen. I'm super excited with that. And you very rightly mentioned that innovation is going to play a significant role. You mentioned about AI, machine learning, robotics. In fact, we had sessions previously where we discussed about role of 3D printing, role of AI, role of machine learning, role of robotics in healthcare, and it was very well taken, and we had amazing discussions on that. And I totally agree that yes, R is definitely possible in India. And what requires is some kind of paradigm shift where same thing can happen in a different way, use some technology. And that is where I think the innovation is going to play a role. And when what innovation comes to my mind, I think it is NMD who comes to my mind immediately. And I see how innovative he is. So before, and what I understand that it's like people are not born genius. Geniuses are created. That way, innovation is created. And to create that innovations, I think what is important is to have that culture of innovation. Unless you have that culture of innovation, I think things may not be that easy and easily manageable. So I think I have NMD here, and who else but he talking on innovations. So NMD, I just want to ask you from your experience, how important is to develop a culture of innovation to become innovative in general, not necessarily pharma at the moment, and touch upon pharma. So I just want you to share from your experiences culture of innovations, how crucial it is to become innovative.
So first of all, thank you very much for bringing me on the panel. You all are very bright people, and I'm really privileged to be in your company today. Let me put it this way, that first we need to understand the words that we use, right? When we say innovation, what is innovation, first of all? To me, innovation is nothing else but finding solution to a complex problem through unprecedented mechanism. Now, this is my definition. There could be variations of that. And number two, you use word culture. And the culture to me means a set of common behaviors which are not written in your corporate or other policies. So there is nobody really driving you with the rules and regulations, but people drive. For example, we have a culture of protecting IP in technology industry, software industry. We get very precious uh, codes and other kind of thing. But why world is still people talk that our protection is not that great in India, etc. But why people are coming and trusting us? Because there's a culture in that particular industry to preserve the the intellectual property of the people who originally developed. So culture is a set of common behaviors which are not written in policies. So we also need to build a culture. And third thing is that when we talk of problem solutions, so far what has happened, you use word India, the way in which I would say is that when you want to solve a problem, try to take a global problem on hand and see where there is a need to solve that problem. I'm not against just looking at India and stuff like that, but from a broader perspective, what I've learned in Silicon Valley is that when you try to innovate, you don't look at problems only in California or in the US or otherwise. They look at global markets, what is the huge issue around the world and try to focus. And then, of course, you may zero in and go to the micro level and depending on your capacity and stuff like that. So, other thing, to develop the culture of innovation, we have to think broad and, across different spaces, and innovation actually happens these days more so, not by looking only in your vertical or in your industry alone. You look at other industries and try to learn from there or create a mix of the things and then do it. For example, today buzzword is bioengineering. It's just not bio. Okay. So as was mentioned some time ago, that you look at different industries, what's happening, and you bring it together. Okay. We also talked about innovations in pharma, for example. The whole world is moving towards organic, right? Now, how do you combine the side effects of the medicines, and can drugs be more organic? I'm not sure. But are there opportunities? I'm just only throwing ideas, not necessarily because I'm not a pharmacist, but at the same time, I'm just thinking that these are the ways to think. It is the systems thinking that really makes us, innovative. And whatever little experience we had, for example, even as a law firm, right? Consistently since 2014, Financial Times has been ranking us as on the top of the most innovative law firms in whole of Asia. How does that happen? So when I go and teach at many law firms around the world, how to be, innovative, the most important thing we have to build is culture. And in all corporates, we have to start with that proposition. And how do you motivate and how do you incentivize through your policies or otherwise is a question mark, because once you have culture set in, people will constantly look for 1 inch improvement, and sometimes they will do exponential 10x thing. That is true. But once the culture sets in, then everybody will appreciate the role of researchers. Typically, what happens that when you have research people in the organization, often not enough attention is paid on them because they say they don't bring revenue. Okay. So marketing people get maximum and research people sit in one corner, So how do you create a kind of balancing environment? So I'm just sharing experiences, not something I'm teaching. Is that what we have done is that every professional has to do research. So everyone in the organization should be trained to think in a way of creativity. So, a kind of research they should be doing, because irrespective of whether they're marketing, whether HR, whether anything else, production line, everyone must go through some orientation for becoming creative, innovative, and there must be an urge developed to improve anything that you do. There is always a scope for 1 inch improvement. That is the most important part of the culture in the corporate environment, if you put it this way. Second thing is that as far as government is concerned, while government can lay down policies, but difficulties arise in the administration and implementation of policy. I think this is where we really need to slim down, because you have greatest of the policy, but if you do not really implement and implement fast, see, democracy, as we always say, It's a great thing, but democracy, if it does not move at the speed at which it is required to move, you have disconnect. So same way, I think regulations and other kind of stuffs which have to come, they have to come very fast and do it. And finally, I would say that how do you develop regulations? So the theory is anticipate, prepare, and deliver. Look to the future, 5, 10, 15 years from now. What are things going to happen? Prepare today. So when the time comes, you're somewhat ready. As I was saying, for example, in 2004, I believe first time statements were made that there will be pandemic of the type which you are seeing today. It is not new. So we as a people in the world knew that in 10 years time, this kind of pandemic will come. But what has happened? Everybody ignored that trend. And now we are certainly trying to find a solution overnight. And we are, looking at this. So I think this is how the culture can be built. There are many things that I can go on, but creating a culture of innovation in India Inc. is something that is very, very critical.
Very, very true. I think thank you very much, NMD. I think you touched upon the what part of innovation so well that after a few questions and discussions with KG and GG, I'm going to ask you again how it can happen and how stakeholders like regulators, companies can play a role. But I think before that, I think GG, I'll come to you. You are common international commercial law expert. You are IP experts. I think this is your fifth webinar in last 2 days. You had a hat trick yesterday and two today, and you have seen the industry, pharma industry, so well from within. You have seen chemical industry since you were born. You are a chemical industry family person, so you know this, and I think you also witnessed some kind of changes, innovation, paradigm shifts happening in your family business also of chemical specialty chemicals will play significant role in pharma also. So I just want to understand from you, what do you think is the role innovation can play in pharma sector? When I say pharma, as KG mentioned, pharma, biopharma, bioengineering, everything, and what role it can play and how it can play. Can you just share your thoughts on that?
Doc, first of all, I'm quite humbled, to be on the same panel with CG and LND. So I'm just sort of absorbing as to, whatever has been said thus far. But I think I'll take, some threads from both the points that were made. First of all, I think, KG, what you mentioned about healthy lives, right? That was the theme. Now, if you really see in the Indian context, I'm just going to spend a couple of minutes on, digressing on certain aspects, but I think in the Indian context, they are very important. First of all, the mindset that, that you have to be healthy. Now, if you see the government schemes over a period of time, right, whether it is hygiene, Swachh Bharat, Fit India, even, getting the LPG gas so that, the village women are not exposed
Ujjwala scheme. Yeah.
to, to the pollution. So all these things, if you see, and plus with the current crisis, the importance of hygiene has been, once again, sort of highlighted, right? So with that particular background, now, that kind of mindset is already, getting created, which probably wasn't there before in terms of, amongst people. Second is the kind of innovations. I think whatever we heard thus far, I think we have to start, from, like, for example, in the current scheme of things, immunity development, right? Preventive medicine, I mean, preventive care. Then you come to cure. But I think all these aspects, holistically, especially when you just keep that healthy lives as a theme, there are so many of these other related innovations, including the point Nishith bhai mentioned. It is not always that in your field you will find that innovation. So the linear thinking cannot work anymore. Is the point we have to sort of impress upon. And to what KG said, even the Prime Minister's conversation, for example, on plant extract. So can there be there we have so much wealth of traditional medicine in India, whether in terms of homeopathy, Ayurvedic and all of that, and then you have chemical based solutions and now biological. So how can all of that sit together and create a solution, for healthy lifestyle, right? I think those are the type of innovations. It is not just one pill, but what goes around that. I think That is going to be very important in the Indian context. The second point that KG mentioned on the digital aspect and AI, I think Nishith Bhai mentioned. So on these two things, I think immense innovation can happen in the Indian context with the so much database that we have, right? However, as of today, that database is quite scattered, not even digitized, right? How can we sort of create the mindset to have that digitization and have certain certain set of people talking to the government on these issues, but that is going to be the other theme which is going to be very important for our part of it. You need the that database to be available, generate the solutions for the problem. First, the identification of the data mining is going to be very, very important. The other to make is the access to medicine. There will be tremendous innovation, and we had begun, we had this happen also how the pharmaceutical companies are trying to reach, not only just the the patient program, digital medium, what are the type of innovations that are possible to allow the pharma companies to contribute to the maintain in terms of continuous guidance and all of that. I think other business models, I will not say it is innovation in the sense of that pharma innovations, but the solution,
Yeah.
because it's evolving. So I think when you look at all this ecosystem, and probably I'll come to the regulatory point maybe slightly later, but I would like to at
I
least
think I'm going to discuss that later on. Yeah.
yeah, just one point, I think the mindset should be of enablers now from the government and not as regulators. So, probably slightly later, but I hope I've answered. I mean, I've just tried to put,
I
points
totally
together
understood
where
your
all
point.
we can, where all we can start looking at. Yeah.
I think, Gigi, very well put. And I think, yes, there is a change in thinking, change in thought process, not only as stakeholders, but government also. And that is what I think you also mentioned about naturopathy, Unani, Ayurveda, and homeopathy. And KG also mentioned about natural estate. I know, and if you see, we have a ministry called Ayush, and they also have recommended of course, it is an anecdotal research, what we call in medicine of using homeopathy. And my wife is homeopath, and she has supplied around 70,000 doses to government to use it in quarantine. And she was just talking to me the results of those patients consuming this particular medication uh, becoming negative is significantly high, almost 70 to 75% positivity. So there is a science, and as you very rightly mentioned, and here I'm going to touch upon what the word Nishith Bhai loves it is competition. I think all these crises and innovations, I think the competition, so getting aim out of competition and bringing competition which is compete and cooperate is going to play major role. So I think KG, I have you touched upon very well, and Nishith Bhai gave concept of culture, and Gowree talked about what and how things are. Now I'm coming back to you on specific on pharma. Now, what are some of the ways India, of course, we are going to touch upon technology later, but broadly being an industry veteran and at the helm of one of the biggest organization of pharmaceutical producers in India, uh, what are some ways India can really boost innovation in pharma, biopharma, and digital health sector as well? And do you think COVID-19 pandemic is really going to play major role or is playing major role? Your thoughts on that, KG?
Thanks, Milind. My view is let us not mix up everything with COVID. COVID, unfortunately, is happening now.
Thank you so
But
much.
even otherwise, picking from where Gigi had left, she very nicely articulated the need for ensuring healthier lives through promotive, preventive, curative, and rehabilitative, approaches. I mean, that's what is the healthcare policy also of this particular country. And if you look at each one of those elements, I think innovation can play a big role, whether it is pharma or technology or digital, whatever you call, can play a very, very significant role in addressing the challenges that are played in each one of these areas, whether it is promotive, preventive, or curative space. Now, let me say a couple of things. I think India has a tremendous opportunity to become an innovation powerhouse. The reason why I'm saying is that if you look in the recent past, right, there have been some very interesting initiatives that have been taken, though it is in a beginning stage, whether it is Startup India, whether it is Innovate India, whether it is Make in India, these are all areas where the government has started or beginning to focus to provide an ecosystem so that the startup, ecosystem or an innovation ecosystem that can be created. At least the movement is happening in the right direction, including Digital India that we are talking about. Now, the reason why I'm saying is that if you look at, again, going back to the Global Innovation Index report, in 2019, we moved up 5 ranks and we became the 52nd. Not that 52nd rank is something to be very proud of, but the fact is that we are moving up. Okay, we moved up 5 ranks and we are ranked now 52nd in terms of our GII ranking. But what is that we need to really look at? When you look at the top, that are there, like US or Switzerland or Sweden or China, for that example, or Israel, these are all the countries that are there in the top 10. What is it that they are doing differently? And I'll just try and touch upon 2 aspects. One, if you look at the science and technology clusters that are built, in this country, US has roughly around 27 technology clusters are there in the US. And no wonder that, you have so many of patent applications coming from the US and so many new products coming in because you have created that type of a ecosystem of scientific and technology clusters. Look at China. Within a short span of time, China has 18 science and technology clusters. Okay, and as we speak in today, at the moment, we just have about 3 such type of clusters, which is IIT Mumbai, IIT Delhi, and IISc in Bangalore. These are the 3. And some of them are not really focused in pharmaceutical, but in the technology space or in the fine chemical space. When we come to pharma, my own thing is that we should start reflecting on it. How do we try and create such type of, scientific and economic technology clusters which can boost innovation in the pharma sector? And this is where I'm going to link to what I said, in the first question that you asked me about the Boston model. I'm sure many of the folks over here are very familiar with the Boston model, where you have an extraordinary ecosystem in Boston area, which has a huge number of biopharmaceutical companies coming together, huge amount of investments going over there. Roughly about $4.8 billion of investment is going into this small area of Cambridge and Boston, employing over 113,000 people over there. 430 biotech companies are set up over there and just working on research in the healthcare space. Okay, is there something that we can pick up from a Boston model and create maybe a Hyderabad model or a Chennai model or a Delhi model or something like that in our country? We have the scientific talent. We have the academic institutions in this particular country. But what we need to really build on is solid infrastructure. We do not have solid infrastructure. Number one, regulatory part, I agree with what Nishith Bhai said earlier. Even if regulatory comes, if it is not properly implemented, there will be a problem. We'll have to work on how do we get it implemented. But infrastructure is very, very important that we give this. In addition to all this, we must also ensure, when these innovations are happening, they are recognized, they are rewarded, they are remunerated. Because if you don't do this, the talent is not going to come in India. Neither the talent that is already in India is going to get motivated, nor if we want to attract talent from outside to come to India and invest here for innovation, they will not come unless this reward, recognition, remuneration system, along with good infrastructure is provided. It will not work out successful. Now, if you look at one other statistics, which is very interesting, PCT publication, and I'm just giving only a comparison between China and India. Biotechnology space, China has submitted 92,000 applications. Pharmaceuticals, 214,000. Medical technology, 115,000, submissions in the year 2019. And you compare that with India. India biotechnology, 2,341. Medical technology, 1,934. The gap is very huge, right? Why is it happening? It's because we have not still created the type of ecosystem that is required, in order to foster that culture of innovation, the mindset of innovation to come in. And that is what that we must try and foster, because I very firmly believe that we have the capability. And where we need to take some, and let us go by one more example, which is not a very good example, but we lost out. India, till a few years back, was one of the biggest hubs in clinical trials.
Yes.
Okay. The clinical trial, sorry to quote it as an industry, if I can call it as an industry, it boomed in this country. Okay, $1.5 billion and odd, it was quite a substantial part. And what did it do? It brought in a lot of science. It engaged a lot of people with science background to get into this particular area, whether they are clinical associates or clinical researchers or whatever it is. Capacity utilization of hospitals were going up, very significantly. Hospitals were scaling up in technology, in quality, in standards to meet with the global requirement of, the clinical studies. But unfortunately, because of, several regulatory reasons, that entire clinical research, base vanished out of this particular country, right? Now, the reason why I'm picking up on this is that is like a low-hanging fruit, what we have. We start at least with the clinical research, then move upwards to the innovation of R, and by that time you establish this culture with this R&D clusters, as I talked about, creating the right type of environment, creating the right type of policy environment, regulatory environment, and also the reward recognition system. The pharma sector can boom. And I think the time is right. The time is right because everybody is now today focusing on what is it that this industry can do to first solve the current problem, but also be ready for the future. Right. And I think what Nishith Bhai said a little earlier, not that this pandemic was not anticipated. I think there were several indications that at some point there could be a pandemic. It's the lack of preparedness that, really is making us suffer today. But at least this should be a lesson for us that we prepare for the future, and India must get ready to invest in that innovation part, boost the investment here, and government funding is extremely important in it. Private sector funding will come, but government funding has to come because that will show the intent of this country to boost innovation. Over to you.
Thank you very much, KG. I think very well said, and it's a kind of a very important point. And clinical trials in India is a typical bell curve type of a situation. But I'm hopeful that with COVID-19 and so many drugs being researched, clinical trials would become very aggressive. And we are going to discuss next week on, I think, Wednesday on clinical trials in India in present times. But you very nicely talked about ecosystem and all, and I think I have 2-3 questions more, and then we'll have question answer session. But I think you talked about ecosystem. Somebody needs to develop that ecosystem, and that is what I want Animdum to come in picture. That he talked about one of the stakeholders in developing the entire innovation, and you very nicely put KG on what are the issues and who can develop. So, anybody, I want you to, who are the stakeholders who can really bring about this innovation, and what role these stakeholders can play to bring that innovative culture, innovations in pharma to be precise? Nishith Bhai.
Let me step back a little bit and slightly, if not disagree, but give a different perspective on government funding. My personal feel is that for these very human-centric research and development, we should not depend on one particular entity, including the government. Government, perhaps you can expect the last. All that we want government is that do not interfere in the business and see that the monopoly or any other kind of right that is given is not abused. That's the short role that government should be playing. Today, India spends $60 billion on defense. $15 billion in the budget goes to education and 10 billion, I think, in healthcare. Now you need to reverse this proportion. I think amount of money we spend in defense, is something, and instead of that, even $5-10 billion spent on diplomacy than the defense equipment, which are 90% never used. We have to be very creative in managing, because in the arms race, nobody wins, number one. But we have to increase budget for the healthcare to start with. If people are healthier, okay, the next thing is they should be educated. If they are educated, healthier people, you will need less of an army. One person will do job of 10%. But if you are weak people, you will not do it, okay? So idea is that we have to really revisit where do we want to focus on overall. But there are a number of different perspectives one could go into. Second thing, that when we talk of innovation, one set of innovation, the industry itself is a stakeholder, but behind industry, ultimately there are consumers. So we have to look at consumer interest as well. So whenever any research is very significantly supported or sponsored by a particular group, generally they would look to see what is in for me. Okay. So yes, if there is nothing in, nobody will work also. That's another side of the coin. But you have to balance it in a way that how can we make things. For example, we spend a lot of money on research and development of medical device or medicine or pharma or other product, right? That is one end of the spectrum. So how do you monetize that? Because if you can't monetize your research, you can't further invest in the next product or the third product. So monetization is equally important, but where do you put limit to the monetization? Or how do you make monetization more productive and profitable and for reinvestment in the new things? Okay. Now, if you see that from a consumer's perspective, he wants the best medicine at the cheapest possible price. Okay. So how do you create business model for pricing? That also would be innovation. Medical device, as we have seen that at times you can have rental model than purchase model. In medicine, packaging, if you see today, can we not innovate in packaging? We have to go only by the international way, the way in which half the time I can't even read the names of the medicine, the composition, what is going on, and whether it's expired or not also I cannot figure out. The packaging itself is very important. Third, there is huge waste of medical or medicines and otherwise. Can it be recycled? Because many times you need 2 tablets, you buy a packet of 10. 8 goes waste. Can we not have a kind of a medical bank which will systematically recycle the waste of medicine so that people can get either free or at a reduced price, but the same medicine. So it will increase the market. It will also do that kind of thing. Third, as far as the basic research is concerned, that is where we should also develop models around what I would call in the technology sector something called open source model. Okay, so you can create some kind of open source model for basic research. I've been talking at times on automobiles, for example, right? Next 50 years is going to be solar and the electric and stuff like that. But the basic research, if you have to do, it requires huge amount of money. So all the collaborating competitors should collaborate and pull money together for basic research. When basic research is done, the benefit can percolate or go to everybody, and then they can add on things to differentiate themselves. But today, no Indian particular company is willing to, or can, I do not know, put significant amount of money in basic research, and the results of which may result in huge success or it may huge failure. So ultimately, it becomes a portfolio, and that is why you work out. So can we not collaborate? And competition, which you talked about, is my favorite subject as well. You cooperate and compete, and you can achieve a lot. Everybody in the game flourishes, So there are so many ways to innovate, and it's just the mindset. It's just the mindset that we have to develop so that we want to find solutions to the problem and make it a better world. Even simple thing, virtual, we are all going virtual now. Use of drones and medical supply. Okay, we've been talking about it. I think Rwanda has done a great use of it. Why can't we do it? Okay. I think some things are coming out, but last 2 years,
Yes.
policies are there, but we are not. 2 years is too long a time. Internet world, 3 months makes a year. So, almost I would say 6-8 years are behind. So, I would think that IoT, all the health check, everything can be done remotely, nearly physical, connect could be felt through IoT, and a lot of things can be done. So doctor doesn't have to go to all the villages and still can know nearly the same way he's taking somebody's hand and looking at the pulse. So those kind of things, there are so many things, but we cannot just look at pharma, I would think, only as a pharma. We have to see outside the industry and what other additionalities can be brought in. 3D printing we talked about and other kind of stuff. In next 10 years, we'll talk about designer babies, okay? But a number of things are going to happen. So if you are not mindful of those, we'll continue to play the catch-up game. So I think those are my few reactions.
I think excellent, Nishith Bhai. It is said, the doctor in me speak that it is the skull, and it is the size of the skull decides the size of the brain. And no additional brain can be accommodated, but it is the capacity of the brain that decides. So I am really happy that the capacity of your left and right, both brains are, which are, I think, above normal, with things of such a very interesting, innovative ideas. And you mentioned about
Abnormal child.
no, not at all. So you mentioned about I think using drones, and I'm sure you know that we have been working with a client on developing a model and structure and strategy on using drones for delivering medical supplies, especially blood components. And their another goal is also to supply vaccines. And I'm very happy that the pilot project has started. And I'm sure that their demand and many other players would emerge when vaccine comes out. And it is said that I think September, October, the people call it fall. By fall comes the vaccines are going to fall to the world. So I think Gigi, I am coming back to you. The most important part. Nishith Bhai gave very interesting examples of doing so many things. And when we talk of innovation, when we talk of research, one word always comes in pharma, that is patent. Now you are a seasoned patent player. So I just want you, what is your take on patent regime in India? Do you think a change in patent regime is required? Or even we don't have something like trade secrets law? Do we need that too? And KG also touched upon on rewards and incentives to researchers. Like if you see most of the drugs, most of the medicines that have come to the market have actually happened in university labs. And that is where professors played a huge role. And US has something like Bayh-Dole Act, which was very good, and there are some pointers on that also. So I just want you to talk about how patent regime needs possible change. There are delays. There is a question also on delays becoming a problem. 5 to 7 years. Trade secret law missing. So your take on entire patent and trade secret regime and what role it can play in boost the entire innovation mindset to make India as an pharma innovation hub.
So thanks, Doc. I think I will, deal with 3 to 4 points. I hope we have time for that.
I have just confirmed with the organizers. We have 10 minutes more.
Okay, fine. So there are 4 points I'll make. The first one, I think I'll take on trade secrets. We do not have trade secrets law in India. Currently, obviously, we are working only on the basis of confidentiality documents and the processes that the companies put in place, and courts have been recognizing that as one of the rights that can be enforced, especially the contractual rights. Having said that, so if you really see, while there is are going on, right, till it reaches the innovation which can be filed for patent, there is that time lag that happens. That is a very, very key important, time within which the entire R, whatever is happening, needs to be protected. The only way it can be protected is by way of trade. right? Point that KG mentioned, when you're creating a hub where there will be, the fight for talent. We have also seen that, talent moving from one company to the other, and then, knowingly, unknowingly taking that that was being undertaken in the earlier company to the next company. And we have seen in the Indian context also, people will be surprised the sector on the right. It is very important to have, the trade secrets law in place, because the contractual obligations that are currently being, sort of enforced is between only the two contracting parties. But the third party is not necessarily bound by that, which can be in the hands of a third party. It can be protected only by way of a trade secret law. So, in my mind, that is something that India should look at. Coming to the patent part. Now, I think back in 2005, or rather, let me say, end of 2004, when India was, I can use that word, was forced to, implement the product patent regime. Am I audible?
Yeah, that it is audible like this.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, you're
So,
breaking up.
yeah. So should I dial in or something, or this is fine?
No. You keep the
No, we
microphone
are running
close to
short
your
of
mouth.
time, Gowree. Just continue.
Yeah.
We have
Okay.
few
So
lot of
on
questions
the
coming.
so on the patent side, I think that time there was a huge demand not to, allow what we call as evergreening of patent, right? That was the reason by which Section 3D was brought in, which said that okay, we will not allow evergreening of patent in India. However, I will not get into too much detail on this, but we do have some publications which discuss this aspect. However, in my mind, whether it is in terms of drafting or implementation of Section 3D, we have gone too far. I think we need to revisit that particular concept, and especially when now the Indian pharma wants to now start innovation, sort of getting into the R mode, we need to revisit that and see what really, if at all evergreening is something which is frowned upon, uh, limit the provision if at all to that and not go beyond that. In terms of timelines, I completely agree with the comment made here by I think Ishwar Singh, that it is very important to sort of accelerate the grant of patent, and I think in one of our sessions we have discussed this at length. The third point is the Bayh-Dole Act that you mentioned. So before that, I will want to make one small comment on the pure science, right? The capability development on pure science. Even in our other session, this particular issue was discussed, that there is not enough respect and recognition in India somehow for pure science talent, and how can we collaborate with the foreign universities and have very high end training brought into India on pure science. And then comes to the point of Bayh-Dole, and the point that KJ has been mentioning is of the reward. So in the US, we have seen, Bayh-Dole Act, it has been praised as well as criticized, but can we learn from that model? And in that context, though Nishith bhai doesn't agree, but there it is mainly the government funded research to which this act applies, and where the universities are in a position to, sort of enter into deals with the pharmaceutical companies for commercialization, get patent, royalties, etc., and then continue the basic science research in the university. So the point that was mentioned with the Prime Minister's discussion of a collaboration between all the, the three sort of stakeholders in the research. So that was something that, that particular ecosystem, to let that happen, definitely needs to get created, whether by way of legislation or otherwise. Because today, when we have done quite a few collaborations where the foreign entity has collaborated, for example, with the government funded research institutions. The IP policies that are in place are quite sketchy. Nobody really knows how the government will or will not have access to that patent. So some clear guidelines should be brought in, and especially on the reward point, yes, like what you saw under the Copyright Act, right? That the authors continue to derive benefit from the exploitation of their works even after they have assigned the rights. There is a concept that Copyright Act created, is the economic right. So can we create something for for the innovators, the inventors, an economic right in the in the research, which which may be commercialized by some third party? So I think if we can just think broadly on these 3, 4 elements and quickly, and I think speed will be the key, quickly rethink, reshape, and go back to the canvas and reshape, the Indian ecosystem, and which to make it enabling rather than, regulated.
Yeah, thank you, Gowree. I think we have a lot of questions coming up, and we have thanks Mukesh for giving us 8 to 10 minutes more. So I'll move on to KG. I think KG, you talked about Boston model, and it was an excellent model. I visited that campus in Boston, where I was pleasantly shocked to see only pharma, biopharma names across all over me. So India is known for jugaad innovations or frugal innovations. Apart from Boston model, uh, uh, what model would emerge in a present time which can go very well with Indian mindset, Indian culture, Indian shortcomings? I also would like to touch upon one particular question from Sanjeev Srivastava, which also is the challenge is implementation. India is a huge country, so how whatever models we think of, whatever changes we think of, can be implemented in India. If you can do it in 2, 3 minutes, it would be great because I want to take up a few questions.
See, let us accept the reality that the Jugaad model, or whatever you call it as frugal innovation, it has been successful, till the time, we have evolved, because the quick fix solution was required and it did work. But I don't think as a country we can really economically progress, forward with, always only through a Jugaad or a frugal innovation model, sorry, Jugaad model, if I have to put it, because it's important that we go for this high innovation. Now, couple of things. I did hear, earlier, Mr. Nishith Desai mentioning about co-optation. And if you look at that particular part, now in this particular crisis that we are going on, we are seeing so many work that is going on basic research, which is mostly on collaboration. Collaboration between pharma companies, collaboration between two pharma companies and a research institution, collaboration between NGOs, research institutions, and industry. This is something, which is a very different type of a model that is emerging. We need to really think through this very carefully, because PPP model, as we call it in India, has been successful in several areas, particularly infrastructure, etc. That is something we must try and see whether it can be implemented in our country as well. Public-private partnership model with the right type of mechanism to ensure that the rewards are properly, shared between the investor into this public-private partnership model. We should try and take a look at it. While I don't have the full details, but I believe that Thailand has tried to do something of a similar nature. They have created a Center for Excellence for Life Sciences, which believe is working well. And similarly, Brazil has also tried to do that, called as Brazilian Innovation Institute, which is like, coming together of academics plus the industry plus the government coming into a particular stake, each one putting in some resource into that, and then focusing on basic research. Some of these models, I think we must try and experiment. The reason why I'm saying, we have extraordinary institutions in our country, but as Gowree mentioned, that we do not have the capability, or we have not had the ability to monetize the type of research outputs that are coming through. The moment we are able to facilitate the monetization of the research outputs that are coming through, I think that will be the type of reward that will also attract a lot of investment coming in from, whether it is, venture capitalist or whatever it is. Boston is successful because the government of Massachusetts put some money, the private industry put some money, but the big chunk of money came from the venture capitalists, right? The moment we establish a ecosystem of that kind, you can expect also funding to come. We must start somewhere, otherwise we can be eternally thinking about this model, but at the end of the day, nothing coming out of it. I think we should go try it, test it out. Something will work, something may fail, but something at the end of the day may come, which is much, much better. And on the pricing part, I just want to take only maybe 10 seconds. What we need to reward is the value of innovation. Innovation has a value, and it is that value which needs to get properly rewarded. And if it is done at the right pricing model, Perfectly fine. It need not be always at a high pricing model or anything of that kind, but the value of innovation has to be recognized and rewarded.
Thank you, KG. I think you had touched upon a lot of questions because there are actually a lot of questions on collaborative model, a lot of questions on PPP model, a question on Sanjeev on implementation. That we need to start. I know implementation is going to be a huge challenge in India considering the sheer size. Now, I will ask one question and asking this question to NMD. I think I don't know, I should ask or not because Nishith Bhai can take 6 hours answering this question. But NMD, I want you to answer this question only in 2 minutes because we have so many questions. We are already 10 to. I have just 7 minutes left. You also touched upon NMD that what role a technology play in making pharma innovation hub for India. 2 minutes.
I
Or
think
we can separate webinar later on.
I'll not take it Indian stretchable time, 2 minutes, but try to respond. I think technology is a great role to play, right from data to the understanding of the economics to use of technology, robotics to, as I said, 3D printing and many other things that are going to come. We should not start implementing later on. Today, you start with the mind to the future. If you start with you start today with the yesterday's mindset, you cannot move forward. And you can always, move forward on the principle of anticipate, prepare, and deliver. Technology has a lot of role to play in this whole game. Whether it's packaging, whether it's manufacturing, whether it is identifying where to focus, where not to focus. Okay, so today there are a lot of predictive technologies that are available, so you can do a lot. And I think that last thing we should be doing, I think, as was mentioned, was to depend on government. Again, I still have my reservation. All that you need government is to put in place basic regulations, and if there is no time, put sandbox regime, so temporary, ad hoc, and then experiment in a limited sphere. That is another way to approach the policy framework. And I would think that, think of a global mindset. How does the technology industry recoup its research and development cost? Huge cost goes into, right? But they look at global market, which of course pharma also does it. But how can you learn something from technology industry? They don't even assert patents in software, and still they are so successful. So we can learn some lessons. I'm not saying one way or the other, and I'm not undermining the importance of anything at this point in time. But asking for money from government, if it comes on, it's topping on pizza. Okay, if it doesn't come, you should be able to do it. There's a lot of dry powder with private equity. There's a lot of people have monies. Otherwise, if there is a purpose, means will follow. I think those ones. And last thing I would say is that you develop something, and learning from technology is continuous development. Because what happens, you introduce a product, immediately within some time you improve on that, you improve on that, you improve on that. So it is not that you develop something today and wait for 10 years to recoup and stuff like that. So I think there are some lessons we can learn from technology industry and use also technology. A lot of things are happening, but for the time being, I wouldn't go into that. As you said, 6 hours for me to discuss. But I hope I have finished my conversation in 2 minutes.
Thank you so much, Nishith Bhai. A lot to learn from you and understand from you when it comes to usage of technology. And I've seen that for last 20 years at ND. Now, I have one last question before we move on to one or two questions to everybody, KG, NMD, and GG. Answer would be just one word or one line, simple sentence. Is India ready to convert this crisis of pandemic, COVID pandemic, into an opportunity on pharma side to become an innovation hub for the world? NMD, we start with you.
Okay, we have an ability to be ready. We are not.
Okay, KG.
Because we have a lot of things to put in place. If we want to be ready, we can be ready. But I think we have to work at the speed of thought.
Yes,
and absolutely. A lot of puzzles, pieces of puzzles have to be put together. But just single-minded, this approach is very important. And come what may, we will solve it. And that is with a reverse deadline, we have to work. So yeah, I would say we are not ready. We are able to be ready. The competency is there. Everything is there. It just we have to put all these pieces together.
Thank you. Thank you so much. That was lawyer's one line. KG, your take, one line. Are we ready?
We have the capability and hope we do not miss this opportunity to be future ready.
Perfect. Gigi.
With can-do mindset, we can do it.
Oh, lovely. Excellent take. And I think we have so many questions, but a lot of questions are answered in question window by Gowree and me. A lot of questions are covered. But I think there are two questions I think we must ask. And I think, KG, I would want you to touch upon that. One is, can, and Gowree also, and Nishith also, if required, can R&D or research and IP be open-ended or open source, or can it be open like what Tesla did in India? That would solve the problem.
We have to evaluate that particular model. So at this particular point in time, I think there is very limited open source type of R&D that is there. It is not that it is not happening, but it has not been much tested. One should probably test it, but just one of the things that we need to keep in mind is that it should not, at the end of the day, discourage innovation.
Okay.
It must, whatever the model that is there, it must encourage innovation, it must recognize innovation, it must reward innovation, it must help monetize innovation. Okay. I think that's the only way innovation will flourish.
Okay. Gigi, want to add anything?
I think some elements could be open source. For example, the analytics piece that I mentioned before, in terms of the database on the basis of which R can happen, those could be probably made open source, because each company need not go and do their that base research. The second thing probably can be open source or maybe made available is the failures that can be sort of gathered even through the failures. So the things that have not gone ahead, can there be a database? Because AI also can use that database to sort of figure out what may work or may not work. So some of these elements, because I agree with KG that it should not that everything is open, so there is no sort of motivation. But some of these pieces probably could be open source, on the basis of which R can be developed.
Okay, I think we have covered almost all questions, and we will
And
take
on that, I'll just add one small thing about open source or whatever. Is this that one thing we learn from technology industry is that technology alone, research alone doesn't really help. Also goes with that is business model. So there is a lot of opportunity for doing business model innovation from a strategic perspective. If we do that, perhaps at least, if not everything, substantially a lot of things can come in open source, and everybody in the whole world, including the people, would benefit. I think again, then mindset to build those business models, to create innovations and have the excitement of doing something new and interesting and solving people's problem. I think that would really help us. And ultimately, we all want to be feeling good of whatever we are doing. I think that's the message.
Thank you. I think there are so many questions on the role of CROs and clinical trials. I think they're going to play a significant role in becoming innovative hub, and especially in COVID times, so many new drugs around the world. And I always say, whether you love India or hate India, you just can't ignore India, and CROs are going to play a huge role. So with note, I would just like to conclude by quoting Gary Pisano, who wrote very well in an article in Harvard Business Review called The Hard Truth About Innovation Cultures. And what he said, that a culture conducive to innovation is not only good for a company's bottom line, it also is something that both leaders and employees value in their organization. That is what Nishith Bhai also mentioned, that buck stops at everyone. And it is very rightly said. I will end by one very popular saying that please innovate, otherwise you will evaporate. Thank you very much, everyone.